Call this meeting, call this meeting to order at 6:07, the August 1st, 2023 Public Works Committee meeting for the City of Woodland Hills. First thing we're going to do is, because I had some issues with my printer and my computer, I don't have any meetings for minutes, for the approval for March 7th, so I'm going to go ahead and table that for now, if there's no problem on that. I'm guessing at this point that there's no public comment. Okay, let's move right on to item number 4, update on well power improvements. Corbett and I have been working to try and get some plan in place and some numbers to cost to do that. We've met with 2 of the 3 folks we need to meet, and he's got a set of numbers that were sent to us today for the 3rd organization. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Corbett.
Well, Rhino pumps for the guys that installed the well originally. I just got the pricing back from them today. It looks like about $83,000. We got an estimate from SESD, and the issue with the estimate from SESD is they don't have lead time yet on the transformer, on a 3-phase 300 kVA transformer. They could be as much as a year out, and they won't get a price for the transformer until it ships, and so it's just an estimate for right now. We don't know what that's going to do. And then we met with Scott Gordon. He's the guy that did the electrician that did the VFDs. We met with him up there.
What's VFD?
Variable frequency drive. That's what runs that's what drives the motor.
Okay.
So you take a VFD, it's like a soft start instead of it being all on or all off or 100% on. The VFD lets it ramp up so you don't have a demand charge as bad as you would if you turn the pump on full on all at once. It's like a dimmer switch, but it's
Dimmer switch is pretty good. I mean,
$25,000 dimmer switch.
It sounds kind of like a transmission.
just to kind of add a little bit to what he just said there, your pumps run at 60 cycle or 60 hertz, and they run at about 1750. And what it'll allow you to do is it'll allow you to lower it down to about 70% of that 60 hertz, which is 52 hertz or something. I can't remember. And that'll slow the pump down, so it'll slow the amount of water you're pumping. At the same time, it'll more than slow down the energy used. So there's a savings there. If you don't need to pump that much water, there's no sense in doing it. So you can kind of control the amount of water you're pumping by speeding the pump up and down. It's a real big savings when you start getting down around 75% of full load on that. There's a big power savings.
How much of life extension do you gain on the pump?
I'm not sure you gain any, to be quite honest.
Really?
The worst thing you can do to a pump is start and stop.
Yeah.
The more you start and stop. And so when you use a VFD, you can run it longer.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of pumping really hard for an hour, you pump soft for an hour and a half. Or like right now, we're pumping full blast for about 20 hours a day right now. But if you could ramp it down, if you could ramp it back a little bit, then you could pump 24/7 and never stop. But the problem with a pump is a submersible motor doesn't have a bearing. It's a water bearing. It rides on a film of water, but until you get the pump going fast enough, it's metal to metal.
Yeah.
But as soon as the pump gets going fast enough, then it starts to float, so to speak. You get that film of water that's built by pressure.
Which brings you down around, depending on the pump, 65% speed is about as slow as you can go.
Right. So
Makes sense.
yeah.
So there is a little bit of life extension of the pump, but not enough to really quantify.
Yeah. But anyways, we're still looking. We're looking at probably 180, 185 maybe.
The numbers I've written down, we talked about, okay, so we've got about 83,000 to exchange the pump and put let me back up a little bit on that. So first off, the primary goal is to get three-phase power up to the well. Okay, so let's pull the pump out of the equation for a second. So the numbers were, again, these are rough numbers we've gotten from the vendors. They still need to nail that down. Hopefully on the presentation on August 22nd, there'll be some solid numbers, but it's going to be approximately 75K for SESD's portion, 25 for the control guy, and probably another 10K in ancillary costs. So that you're about $110,000 for the three-phase portion of it. However, I did not include the impact fee in that because I have no idea what that would be. There's going to be an impact fee.
Well, we'll get a little bit of a credit for the impact from the original impact fee that was paid for the single phase power. And we might get some trade in. I mean, we've got, when we did the single phase power, we got a single phase transformer, and it's a really oddball because it's a 480 volt, 277 480 on the output, single phase. It took us, when we bought it, it took us like 16 weeks just to get the transformer, and that was before COVID, right? But when we did it, we bought two, so we've got a brand new transformer up there that's just been sitting on the on the concrete. We may be able to get some credit for the one transformer that's never been plugged in, so to speak, and even the other one, but we don't know yet. We're looking about 180, between 180 and 190,000 to upgrade the well, to get three-phase power, and to swap out the 125 horse motor with a 6-inch pump column for a 200 horse motor and an 8-inch pump column, and that'll give us roughly about 1,350 gallons.
Okay. Will we be able to flip the whole city over to the Salem well during the time they're working on that, or will it not even affect?
We'll have to wait until we can. If that's, I mean, I don't think that's going to be an issue because when we run both booster pumps, if we run the old booster pumps, they'll put out 1,000 gallons a minute, and the Broad Hollow well right now only puts out about 750.
How long do you think that would take, the pump side of that equation? What would the lead time be on install of the new pump?
It's going to take us, what's Scott say today, a week?
Scott, that was on the VFD portion of it. So that would be, he said a week, but we would want to add some time to that. So
On that quote from Rhino, did they give us
they
install time?
do I have the quote from Rhino? But usually when you start doing, I don't know if there's a quote, but my experience has said, depending on weather a lot, it's going to probably be about 2 weeks. He didn't put any, he left the lead time blank, but so you're pulling the pump out, depending on, some crews will work 24/7, some will just work 8 hours a day, whatever the be, but there's probably about 40 hours of labor in pulling the pump, and then another 40 hours of labor installing it. So, that could be anywhere between, say a week to 2.5 weeks, depending on how long they work. Yeah, so that would be the lead time. I would probably give it a full 2 weeks, but that's something we do need to ask them.
I mean, the nice thing about it is that the pump and the VFD are in different rooms, basically. I mean, the pump and column will come out through the patio, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the VFD is inside the well house. So the electrical can be done at the same time.
Can the electrical done even before?
Yeah.
Just not the connection?
Yeah. Actually, we could install
Because the pumps process is the only thing that's actually going to delay water to the city, right?
well, we're hoping. Say that again?
So water turned off from the Broad Hollow well will only be in effect, right? So the water turned off will only be while the pump is being replaced, correct?
Yeah.
So you could wire it all even beforehand.
No,
And then swap out and then reconnect? No.
that is not the case.
Okay.
So because the steps involved, I'm sorry, I'm taking,
No, you're fine.
stepping in there, is obviously you got to bring the the conduit up from, the top of
Broad Hall.
Broad Hollow to the well house. So there's that. Then you
But
got-
that's not going to affect the water, the pump
At
current.
this point though, then
Okay.
you gotta set the transformer, and then you gotta, from there, then you start getting into where you may have to shut the well down for a week or 10 days, whatever it takes to run the conduit, put the new equipment in place and get all the electric running, because you can't, because you gotta tie all the new system in. So you're probably losing about a week to 10 days, let's just call it 2 weeks just to be safe,
Yeah.
of pump time to set up the new control system
Of the Broad Hollow
of the
well.
Broad Hollow.
But no matter what, we won't do it until well, it doesn't matter because the Broad Hollow well will be down for 2.5, 3 weeks, whatever. But during that time, we can run the Maple Court boosters and pull from the Maple Canyon well. And more than supplement what the Broad Hollow well has been doing.
Perfect. Okay.
Corbett, should we be setting aside money for this when the time comes? I'm talking, you're looking at maybe what, year, 2 years out?
Yeah, we do already.
We do.
Yeah, our depreciation fund does that same, does.
You know how much is in there now for that?
I think this last year we budgeted 110,000, 120,000 out of the water fund for depreciation.
Okay.
And we're planning to use ARPA, right? As well, the ARPA money?
Well, that's what has been proposed, is to use that ARPA money.
I don't know if have we thrown that to vote yet?
No.
Or just get the numbers and come back and report?
The way I remember the discussion was, yes, we should use the ARPA money for the well. But then at the same time, that's something we could do, but the council didn't have any information what it's going, so we're trying to get the information
Perfect.
That's what all
To the
this is to
council
do, is
to help make that decision.
Excellent. Okay.
I think the goal for sure is to try and get the three-phase power. I mean, this is, I'm kind of overstating what the way it is, but just to kind of give an analogy or parallels. Imagine having your 20 or 15 watt ramp outlet here, and you have a big heater on the other side of the room over here, and you're using a Christmas light extension cord to run it. That's kind of where we're at right now. We're not that bad, but we're at capacity on everything, so it's.
No, I'm fully on board with doing it. I'm looking at it just now from what's impact to the city, to the residents. What is that sequence? I'm looking at it from my project management standpoint.
So
I think it'll be seamless.
I also, my motivation in having us use the Maple Canyon booster station is, I just want to make sure that remains viable.
Oh, and it always will be. I mean, unless you guys want to give up your interest in the Maple Canyon well, and I don't think you do.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a vote for that anywhere.
And I think on top of that, it's probably a very good point that you just brought up, David. Might not be a bad idea to give it a dry run to make sure that that's all going to work before we, turn everything off up here.
Mm-hmm.
Just do that, run it. The challenge with that is, you'll have a second demand charge there. It's going to cost a little extra money, but we'd be able to talk to SCSD and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do, and they may or may not be willing to work with us, but that would be the only thing.
Well,
There might be
They
some
they have
costs
in the
associated.
past. They have in the past.
I would say I would like to, I realize this imposes a bit on you, Corbett, but I'd like to see us doing that at least for an hour every month. Where we're pumping water up to that upper tank from the Maple Canyon well. Just, again,
Yeah, I mean, if you did it every 6 months, you'd be fine. But when you run it, you're going to pay a demand charge unless the power company, unless SESD will waive the demand. And they've done that in the past. And the only thing that we have to do is run it when they tell us it's okay to run it.
I'd be 3 in the morning.
oh,
You know?
well,
I mean, the demand charge is about, for one pump, it's about $500 just to turn it on. So it's not a huge deal, but if you run it for an hour and you only pump, 10,000 gallons of water or 50,000 gallons of water, that's expensive water compared to.
I think $1,000 in our budget each year for testing it twice. seems very
Well, but
well
again,
spent.
if we work it out with SESD, and in the summertime, demand is during the day, you
Yeah,
know?
so we do it early in the morning or late at night.
Right. And as long as we hit off-peak demand, then they'll waive, in the past anyways, they would waive that demand charge. And to waive it, all you got to do is cut the plastic clip off of it and flip the little lever out. But if the plastic clip is broke off, gone, when they come, then they charge you full demand anyways.
Let's see if I remember the board. No.
Right.
But I think the big challenge is, and what what's his first name,
Ryan,
suggested that the mayor could actually meet with the
board?
board to see if they can work with us on the impact fees for the upgrade. However, it was very clear that, impact fees are pretty, not real flexible. They may or may not be able to do. But as Corbett just said, the important thing is that we've already got, 50, 60% of the impact fee paid for the system's already there. So we'd only be paying the difference.
I like that.
So that was, and this was, fun. So, they've worked with us on, because we've also explained the berm to them, about how, they say having issues with the berm they're putting in, with
Oh.
the chain.
Right.
So that was all covered.
Any questions? Anybody?
No, I mean, my feedback is, let's keep moving forward. I'm very strongly in favor of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah, we're in trouble if something bad happens there. So creating as much redundancy as possible is,
Well, I mean, we have redundancy.
well,
mean-
yes, but making sure the Broad Hollow Well's working as it should be instead of as we had to build it in the past, right?
Making sure it works as we hope it works.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, if there's nothing else, so we can move on to, and then kind of when we had our meeting back in March, we wanted to get together in June and kind of talk about a lot of discussion on public works priorities. This was probably the main item on that list that we wanted, if there was only one thing we could get done, we felt that was it. We had the impact fee thing we talked about, I think that's all taken care of. The other thing I know that we worked on that list is, Corbett is, we talked about getting a sounder for watch water level. He's actually built a setup that we can actually set up at the upper well. It won't work with the lower wells, but something there so we can actually kind of do some trending on that. So we're kind of taking care of that as well.
We still need to install the pipe or the tubing.
Yeah, the tubing is all, but it's very minimal cost, and he's, kind of putting it together in spare time. And that's, again, this is a long-term, for me, it's not going to affect me. I'm not going to be here long enough. I might not be live long enough for it to affect us, but nonetheless, I think the long-term viability of the city system, we need to start trimming that over the next few years.
Well, especially if we start, if we upgrade the well and we draw double the water that we're pulling out of it now, because right now we're only pulling 750 gallon a minute. But the pump curve, and it's all relative until you get it in and you actually do it. But the pump curve says that we'll be able to get 1,350 GPM out of it. So it would really be nice to know what that drawdown is going to do to us. In that we're estimating to drop the pump another 60 feet. So we're saying 600 feet. Right now it's at 540. So if we drop the pump another 60 feet, it doesn't really affect. I mean, it affects the output because you add 60 feet of column and you add 60 feet of friction loss because you're moving water through that extra 60 feet of pipe. But it doesn't really affect it because the water level is relative.
Won't be changing.
So you're only actually pumping water through the dry section of the the casing. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So
You won't be
Anyways.
changing the dynamic head.
It's like a
not,
straw.
not much. Yeah. Yeah, not much.
But to buy one of those commercially, they're like $1,000 or $2,000 at the most,
One or
aren't they? A sender unit determine the depth of the water level?
Well, it's not the sender that's the issue, it's tying it in. How do you collect that data? Because you can just take a piece of tubing and drop it in the hole and pump it up with a tire pump and read it. It's tying it into your SCADA system so that you can read it, you can monitor it continuously.
So it's down there permanently, in
It
essence?
will be.
See, we originally talked about a portable unit where manually you go in and then you just write it in a log, it would have a log where you write
Right,
it down.
and that's what I've seen
And you
used.
could do that, and you could still do that with the lower pumps. If you wanted to, that would do a couple of things. It would tell us, is there a separation between the two aquifers? What it is, does pumping on this affect this aquifer and not this one, or does it affect them both the same? There's a lot of data that can be gathered on that. Again, it's a long lead time to gather that data. It's gonna be several years to see how it trends. But nonetheless, if you were to do that, you'd have to do that for several years, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. It's just a matter of spending, an hour a month or whatever you want to do to go down and say, okay, this is what it's doing, and then you would record pumps running when we're doing this, pumps not running when we're doing this, and you just trend that data over several years, and you can kind of get an idea of what's happening. I still think it's a good idea, but that's what I think. So all in all, I think on the priorities, he's also kind of taken a little better approach to safety. I know that Harry was going to talk to the league about some, boilerplate safety policies that we might be able to incorporate. I haven't heard back from that, but I think we've made some progress on that. I think we've gotten some movement on the priorities that we as a committee have kind of put forward to the council. And again, realizing that, we are not the big picture. We are the lower left-hand corner of the big picture. You guys on the council have a lot of other things that you need to consider and all that. Just so we do appreciate the interest in what we presented to the council.
Is there anything from government or state agency that is concerned with safety that we could get some guidelines from them as to things to look out for or be aware of or be concerned about? I mean, a lot of that we won't have.
What we
but
could do,
Some we might.
but be careful, it's a fine line we're crossing. I mean, it's a dangerous line. What we could do is we could invite OSHA in to give us an inspection. If you invite OSHA in, they will give you recommendations, and sometimes they're a little bit more stern than just recommendations, but they won't fine you because you invited them in.
They won't find us anyway.
Well, actually, they can now, to my understanding, but any bottom line is they won't fine you because they want any government entity, can't find another government entity, but anyway, but they would still enforce upon us rules, so there may be a lot of things that we're not ready for that we would have to implement.
I just finished an ocean
Oh,
inspection.
you did, well, good, okay.
I mean, it's probably been within the last 6-8 months, but I mean, I got a list from them and I got a clean bill of health finally from them.
But we didn't have any issues that they were concerned about as
Oh,
far
yeah.
as,
I mean, it's like the fire extinguishers in the building. They have to be inspected monthly. And to inspect them, you have to turn them upside down. You have to rotate them so that the powder in them doesn't solidify, cake up. Yeah. I've got a inspection log. The eye wash station has to be flushed weekly. I mean, there's a,
The very nature of an inspection is they will find something. I mean, that's
Make sure
just
they
the,
find something.
that's the way it
we
goes.
give them something to
They're
find.
bureaucrats.
Give them something so they don't find something.
but I mean, it's like hand drilling in the well. hand railing in the well house because the back half of the basement is a fuel vault. And so I had to have railing around the opening. I put the lid on it and she passed it off. Since then, I pulled the lid off and installed the railing. You know, I mean, it's only been the last, week? Within the last week that I finished the railing. I still haven't finished the ladder because I have to have railing from the floor level to 4.5 feet above the floor. And so, I mean, it's still a work in progress, but she realized that, but she signed off on it. So.
Are there any concerns that you can share with us that we as a committee need to maybe go to the council, and there's money that's needed to satisfy one of the requirements or something of that nature to improve or be better or address it? Are there any things like that, Corbett?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, nothing that isn't normally budgeted for anyways. I mean, the oxygen monitor is going to die one of these days and it'll have to be replaced, but that's covered in a tool budget, you know. So the blower, the confined space blower, is going to die one of these days, but that'll be covered in a annual tool budget, you know. I don't know that there's anything that we really have to worry about.
Okay.
I mean, it's the bigger issue is means and method kind of a thing. You know, when I go into a vault, I can't be there alone. And so it's the day-to-day stuff that has to be done to comply with all the requirements.
How do you do that now?
Call Mark.
Okay, so that's handy, but we don't have another employee that,
I
It's
mean,
Mark.
Mark or Zach. I mean, I can't do it alone.
right? No, I
So-
get that. I'm just asking,
So,
who
yeah.
is it? Like, is that something we need to be concerned about, that we don't have enough employees to actually meet the requirements?
I do want to touch on the Dave's comment about shoulders. So we need to figure this out as far as budget and
David Stones?
Yeah. So we've got shoulders that need to, and David and Chris and I have texted back and forth, you know, a little bit in the last few days even. The shoulders of the roads need to be addressed. They absolutely do. It takes time. But then the question comes, what do you do with it? Do we just fill it back up with road base and then let it wash out again? And the last comment that I made was the places where it's washed out the worst, it's almost done our work for us for filling in for rock line ditches,
Yeah.
you know. But
Plus, we know the direction the water's gonna go.
well, and the places that are washed out the worst right now, they're going to be washed out again if we just fill it in with road base. To me, the issue comes, do we do like we did down here in Woodland Hills Drive, which doesn't meet our standard, or do we spend the extra money to get a shoulder and the fabric? And I mean, we put fabric on this down here. We kind of tore a lot of it up. But do we spend the money to do it according to our standard or not?
What would you do different? What makes this not to standard?
We don't have a shoulder. You got rock right, the rock comes right up to the back of the curb. I mean, this down here was, I mean,
It's a rush job.
well, yeah, absolutely. You know,
And for a rush job, it's spectacular.
So help me understand. You have a rock line ditch with fabric, and then how much space between the edge of that and the road?
4 feet.
So you need 4 feet.
That's what our standard says.
So one of the challenges that we had with that area is I know we could have 4 feet, but there's kind of some walls and things that are in the way for 4 feet.
Well, but you're going to have that no matter where you go. If you're in the older part of town, you're going to have that no matter where you go. you're going to have issues like that. Whether it's a mailbox or not a mailbox, but a pillar, a driveway entrance pillar, or a rock wall, or,
Some little monument somebody's created.
yep, whatever it is. And so trying to anticipate that, what do we want to do? Do we want to develop another standard? It doesn't matter to me.
I
But-
think we meet the standard where we can.
I agree.
How do you enforce that? Okay, so you got a developer that, I mean, what's the criteria for whether or not you can?
Well, I think it's
Is
the
it going to be
difference.
money?
It's the difference between, and I'm not trying to create a loophole for us in this, but it's a lot like grandfather law, right? New developers have to meet the current standard, and when we're putting in, say, rock line ditches on Woodland Hills Drive, for us to meet that standard, we would have to demolish certain aspects of current residents, landscaping, structure, walls, monuments, whatever we want to call them. And I think we just have to do the best we can. I think right now, beating ourselves up on a standard is causing more problems than just doing what we did.
No, I agree.
I think
What do you
one thing
want?
we could do is when there's a new home construction in an older area, require rock line ditches built to a standard. That might not be a whole lot, but it will be some.
Well,
As homes are built there, require them to have a rock line ditch in front of their home on their property line.
we've tried that.
It doesn't work?
No, I mean, all they do is they come to the city council and the city council says, well, okay, that makes sense. I mean, even on developers, John Herod, that did the inside corner down at the bottom of Oak, he did a 3-lot subdivision and came back to the city council and says, this doesn't make any sense to make me put in rock line ditches. And so the city council let him get away with not doing rock line ditches or concrete curb, containment curb. I mean, my attitude is if you don't start somewhere, you're never going to get there. But do you do concrete containment curb like Bill Collins installed right up here? And you got and we stopped the containment curb right here at the Highline intersection. And then you got no containment curb until you get to Bill Collins. And then Bill Collins, we made Bill Collins do his frontage in anticipation that we were going to do the whole thing. And then because of money, we quit doing it. We stopped right here as far as the cities, how much the city wanted to do.
Yeah, that made me angry.
I mean,
I think
it was a money issue. I mean,
You
it was
require the
the
person to
city
do it.
council's decision.
So let's go back to, did you say Herod down there?
John Herod is the guy that's developed those 3 lots on the inside corner down at the bottom of Oak, or
Right.
across from Guy Thomas down there,
the truck hole.
opposite side of the road from where that truck ended up in the front yard.
Right. So I remember parts of that discussion. And because it was so high up, meaning the ground was so high up compared to where the road was, that's, I think, where his argument was, it makes no sense for me to have to do rock line ditches. Because he also would have had to remove a fair bit of dirt from that inside corner. That's what I recall of the discussion.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I will say this. Your opinion carries great weight. So if you say, we shouldn't do that, then 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to vote for it. And I think that's just the reality. So, if we have something that's comes before us and it's a bad idea from a public works standpoint, then let us know, bring it up.
I mean, again, what do we want to do on rock line ditches? I
So
mean, every place where we walk, I mean, again,
I
it
think
needs to
we-
be done.
I think we follow our standard, but using your term grandfathering, is if there's a spot where there's something that is physically in the way and it would require destruction, then we figure it out in that one spot, the end spots on a big long road. But I think in general, we follow our standard.
And I agree with what Ben, you just, I mean, look at, let's use an example. A mature city like, let's say, Provo. You'll look at the development in Provo, look at the different neighborhoods, and you'll see how they're developed differently. That's because they have changed the standard from, say, 1940 to 2010 or whatnot. And you see in that change as you drive through the community. And in all cases, it's not practical to have a standard from 50 years ago and a standard from today to try and come back and retrofit or make it retro, so I totally agree that a grandfather.
Yeah, they do this everywhere. I mean, Provo's spent the last 10 years putting in ADA curbing on the corners.
Everybody is.
They didn't do it initially. They didn't do every place at once. They've done it over time, and it's, and there's still some places in Provo that don't have that.
Or another example would be street lights. Just coming up, in the older neighborhoods, they're gonna be, 25 feet wide, new ones, they might be 35, I don't have, but just, kind of a conceptual thought. So, yeah, I agree. We can do what we can do moving forward, but we have to, we gotta do something with the mess we got. To do nothing because we can't do what we need to do is probably worse.
Okay, so given the fact that we're going to follow the standard where we can, okay, so that decision is over with.
No, well, it's not over for me, because what's the criteria? Is money going to be an issue?
Of course.
And right, and that's my thought. It has to be an issue. And so,
But I don't see how money to me controls the length at which we do a rock line ditch, not necessarily the standard by which we do a rock line ditch. So we may do 100 feet or 80 feet instead of 200 feet. To me, that's where money comes into play.
okay, but when you've got a section, I mean, you got the steep part of Oak. That's in bad, I mean, it's in bad shape and needs to be done.
It's the next worst spot after Woodland Hills Drive's fixed. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, I get
And
that.
so,
So we look at our budget and we do as much of that. So to me, it's not, what we need to do now, and that's kind of where I was going, is we now need to prioritize. We now need to say, okay, this section of Oak is priority number 1. This section of Maple is priority number 2. This section of Broad Hollow is priority number 3. And then that helps us divide up whatever funds we do have and prioritize in what order we're going to do these things.
I think it's going to have to be a mix. I think it's going to end up being a mix of both. Because if you've got 1,000 feet of oak, I'm just throwing a number out, I don't know what it is, but if you've got 1,000 feet of oak and it's got to be done this year, it's got to be done before winter. And you're looking at $30 a foot if we follow the standard, or $15 a foot if we do what we did on Woodland Hills Drive. You've got 1,000 feet that's got to get done this year, or whatever it is. And so
But I think that's where the budget comes in, the overall budget. If you've got $30,000 that's budgeted for rock line ditches at the start of the year, then you've got to plan accordingly, decide where that priority is, and spend $30,000 on a rock line
but that's
ditch.
my point. If you've got $30,000 worth of work that has to be done, if you follow the standard, and you can, and you have the room, and you're not taking out walls or whatever, if you've got $30,000 worth of work that's got to be done, if you follow the standard, but you've only got $20,000, what are you going to do? Because it's got to be done.
Well, can we cross that
Are
bridge?
you willing to cut back on the standard to get the work done? I mean, that's what we did on Woodland Hills Drive, right? We
Yes.
cut back on the standard. We didn't do the shoulder where we could have. We cut back on the standard. Or, I mean, is it going to be a worthwhile endeavor to try to figure out? Well, I guess we have to figure it out anyways. And my point is,
I
Cross that
think
bridge when
if
it
we're gonna
actually is
require a homeowner to build a rock line ditch to a standard, we have to do that same standard.
you can't afford to. That's my point. You won't afford to because you don't have the money.
10, 20 years, maybe the city will have ditches by then.
But you drive that section of Oak, and we don't have a choice whether or not we fix it. It's bad enough that if we don't, I mean, today's rain wasn't a big deal because it didn't last long enough. But you get a storm that lasts long enough and you get another washout, and it's going to be assholes to elbows like Woodland Hills Drive was.
But that's where the priority is gonna come into play. Is that a priority, or is Woodland Hills Drive a priority? And how much money set aside to do that? Maybe we can't, on a large project like that, maybe we can't do it in 1 year.
Okay.
Maybe it's a 3-year project.
Okay.
I would tell you real quick, because I know that David needs to get out of here in the next like 15 minutes. So one of the things that, back to what Ben was talking about and what you were talking about, the storm has done a lot of the work for us, and you talked
Right.
about we can fill it in and it'll do the job it needs to do, but it won't be to our standard. I think controlling the water, is probably gonna be number one priority. If we can do it, at substandard, for lack of a better choice of words, and make it work in the areas that have already been developed, and get back to new development has to do that. Yeah, and I know what you're saying, it's hard for a homeowner to spend, $15,000 to do this piece and watch the city next door only spend $8,000 to do the same thing. They'll be before the council complaining about that. That makes perfect sense. But maybe at this point, we can get with David Stones, and maybe say, hey, have him work with us and say, what do you need to solve this problem? And take some input from him as well.
Well, the biggest thing for all of this is just the data. I haven't had time to do it. I don't know that I will get time to do it.
I know last weekend, I think Jody and David rode around most of the city and made notes of where those problem areas were. So some of that data may have been collected already.
Okay. All right.
And I think that's another point is, those are the types of tasks I think you could leverage this council for, this committee for, right? Things that do not require your expertise, but maybe just require, hey, couple snapshots. Hey, this is kind of what we're looking at. Here's a map of the city. Go draw them out. And here's my wheelie measuring stick, and get me some lengths, measurements, and thoughts.
Who's going to do it?
Well, and that's the question, right? If you say, hey, this is what needs to be done, we bring it to the committee and then see if anybody will volunteer. If nobody then volunteers, then typically I'll take it. But
Okay, I'm happy to do Oak. But again, what I'd like to do is I'd like to have, whether it's David Stone's spreadsheet or whatever, he loves spreadsheet.
he does.
So have him say, from a snowplow dude's perspective, this is what I view as priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. Now we go and again, I'm willing to do this. We go walk it and we measure how deep it is, how far, whatever the measurements are that you want us to get.
Well,
We go and get those.
we just follow the standard.
I guess what I'm saying is, whatever measurements you need to verify that truly is the worst.
We're trying to get a priority. A prioritization list
How
gives
deep
us.
is the water? How deep has the water already cut it? How far away from the road has it been cut? Is it right next to the road? Is it
Okay.
away from the road? Whatever the numbers are you need, you tell us, give us a little piece of paper and say, here, go collect this. And then I'm happy to go collect it.
That's
I'm not-
the analytics that needs to be gathered so that we have an idea of how much ditch are we ready to do, how much ditch is done for us already as far as washed out. Do we want to put the money into that stuff as far as putting fabric down, dressing it? Because you can't just dump rock in it, right? You can't just put fabric. You've got to dress it up first. Then you've got to lay your fabric, and then you've got to put the rock in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like you can just drive down the side of the road and fill it in with road base. I mean, you could, but all that's going to do is wash
We've
out.
done
As we
that.
say, we've done
We
that.
just fill culverts
That's
that
what we
way.
keep doing.
For me, it comes down to this: prioritization should be dictated on where the areas of the street are jeopardized. Right? Because that's what we're trying to really protect.
Right.
Is the road, and that's what made us pull the trigger so rapidly on Woodland Hills Drive, is we had places the road was about to collapse, and now this becomes super expensive. Right? Rockline ditches are peanuts in comparison to fixing roads. And so that's kind of my thought. And this is also now a great discussion. And my point, or my opinion, is with this type of data, this would then help us drive the prioritization from creating the budget each year as the council. Right? Then we have a list of line items with expenses, and we have a pot of money, and then we can start allocating to the projects of per their prioritization. And then we can, as the council, define what the prioritization is per the demand. And I think that would very much help inform the budgetary meetings, but that's a different conversation.
Jody was out a minute ago, we were talking about, you were saying that you and Dave drove around the city and. Is there any input that you have to offer us on this, as to what you guys found or anything, or is that something we should get with David on?
I just took notes.
Could we get a
I was
copy?
just told to write in shorthand
Okay,
notes, and so I
wait, we'll get with him on it.
ask him to give you
We'll get with
the
him on
brief,
it.
I'm sure it's spreadsheet or whatever he.
David Stone's in brief. Yeah, that's good.
And in conclusion.
I was right.
Okay. Anything else? For it?
All right now.
I was actually gonna cover that under other items, but it sounds like we just took care of the other item discussion. Okay, so item number 6, Wayne and I talked a little bit about this last week. I think the council already approved that policy, on the 300-foot sewer connection. There was,
There's one thing that is not addressed, and I don't know if it needs to be, and we tailored ours after the state code, is that anybody within 300 feet of a sewer line needs to connect to it. So the question is, does that mean that a homeowner has to dig into the city street if he's 250 feet away from it to connect? Or is that the city's responsibility to take that to the front, to his home, where he then comes directly out from his home and ties into that sewer? So my view is, I don't think the state law was intended for the homeowner to have to build 250 feet of trench and dig up the city road to do that. My thought is that that's the city's responsibility to do that if he is within 300 feet, and then he comes out from his house to the connection, and that's his portion of the.
and I actually talked with, I didn't catch his name, his supervisor will be back in the week office next week, and we can follow up, Jen, I can't remember her last name, but who's in charge of that. But what he told me, and he says he's not 100% sure, but what it didn't make sense, he says, in a 300-foot range, because we talked about private property being within 300 feet, or something like that, he says, in the way the state has been looking at it is, it's going to be, blocks and a grid system in a community, and streets are going to be at least 300 feet apart. So if it's going down this block, it's unlikely you're going to be within 300 feet of it, so you wouldn't be forced to connect. But what you just said is exactly right. Let's just say Heritage, for example, the sewer line only goes so far up Heritage over Settlement, and then it terminates, and this lot up here is 250 feet away. So yeah, how much requirement is it going to be? So I think Jen is supposed to get back to me when she gets back in the office next week and get a follow-up. If you want, I can reference you to that to kind of get some clarification on what the state's position is, because
Is it the distance of the lot or the distance of
It
the
is the
home?
property line. It is the property. I thought it was the home, but it is the property line. That's what the state code says.
So I guess I don't know, I just remember when I built down in Orem. Orem City brought the connection to the property line. I was responsible going from the house to the connection.
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind of proposing we do?
Yeah.
That
Well,
makes
the
sense to me.
issue with that, I mean, again, just to think it through, is that who's the city? It's everybody, right? And so you're using my tax dollars to install sewer main in front of your property so that all you have to do is connect to the sewer main in the street. But when I bought my lot, or whoever, wherever, if sewer is already in your frontage, you paid for that sewer main. I mean, the developer didn't do it for free, right? And so you paid for the sewer main across your frontage in the price of your lot. Now you're gonna pay for the sewer main in front of my lot also? That just doesn't seem fair to me.
I know Mapleton, when you want to connect into like the water system, if you've bought a lot that is so far away from the water line, you pay for the water line to get to your property. So,
And then anybody that develops along that water line reimburses you.
now here's another thought. My frontage, for example, on my lot is 100 feet. So basically, if I am within, which I'm not, but let's pretend that the sewer line is close to my house, I'm now basically saying, okay, from the edge of my property, so not even including the 100 feet in front of me, I'm basically on Highline, we're all about 100 to 130 feet wide. I'm basically 3 houses down, so I'm assuming everybody's paying actually just to get it to their property line, right? And so it shouldn't be somebody paying 300 feet because there should be then passing other property
What if I
lines.
don't want to connect to it?
Well, what we're saying, I think, is back to Wayne's point, is what we have not addressed in the ordinance we passed the other day is time frame stipulations. We have not mandated connections. So now it's just, is that your
Well,
understanding as well, David?
Well, okay, so new construction, you have to connect.
Correct.
So we're talking
Just
historic.
new
but only-
construction where the sewer is.
Yeah, but only if you're within 300 feet.
Right. So we're,
And that's what the discussion was.
I think
It's
it's
not
three-
the house, the
I think
distance
it's
of the house
300 to
from
the
the road.
property
I
line.
verified with the state. It is the property line, not the property.
So I think
Not the
it's
house.
this.
But the frontage or
It's within 300 feet of.
No,
Again, they're supposed to
the
be
nearest property line.
Right, so if the pipe is here, I don't know if you can see that, Jody. Right? If I'm building in this lot here, I'm within 300 feet, I have to pay. The question is, do I pay for this section here? Correct? Is that what we're debating here? Right?
From where you marked it to your place.
That wasn't what I was debating, but that's a
So-
good point.
Right here
What,
is the question, is this the city responsibility or is this
The homeowner.
the homeowner? I would argue, personally, from other cities that I'm aware of, this is not the city, this is the resident. Now, they can then work with these two to help. It's brutal, any way you look at it.
Okay,
Let me add a
just a
little bit.
minute, just a minute.
Please.
I'm just asking a practical question. This is not what I was arguing, and I don't think we have many homes that are in this situation. So I don't know that this is the most common use case.
So, draw your thoughts here.
My thought was simply this. You got the pipe in front. Is this greater than 300 feet?
Well, that's always going to be the answer.
That,
Because the streets are how wide's our streets?
50. Most of them are only 50 feet. wide.
Right?
that's
So,
why I think for the most part, this is kind of a moot discussion.
and that's why I think this is the number we're talking about.
Well,
Is if the
but
pipe's
again,
here,
this is so not an issue
It will be. It will be, and it'll be one, if you pass that ordinance and you require people to, and you put a time frame in it, and you require someone to connect to it, if you're within 300 feet, you have 5 years, whatever you decide. If you're within 300 feet, you have 5 years to connect to it.
Again, this is the connection I am most concerned about.
That's only 25 feet.
I get it,
At
but
best.
that's what I'm trying to incentivize is that.
But that's not what your ordinance says. Your ordinance says if you're within 350 feet of public sewer, you have to connect.
The concern I have is, okay, you're talking about the street, coming up the street here. I'm talking about, I'm gonna kind of shorten this up a little bit. I'm talking about another street here with the sewer line in it, less than 300 feet, but private property that you would have to cross over to get to it. How would
Well-
you do with that?
So for instance, my house is on Highline, right? There, right? I live over there.
That way, what's
Spring is above it. So Corbett and I had many discussions on this. The people on this side of Spring would have to connect to the sewer in Highline.
Yeah,
And they
I
get
mean, yes
you
or
around
no,
the
you
private.
could pump.
Well, they could pump up to Spring, but really, for gravity, they're going to have to come through my backyard. And that's a whole other ball of wax. And that's 600 feet.
Okay, but we've kind of got, we've got provisions for this. So getting back to Mark's use case, 300 feet through private property would have to be measured by whatever the easement is, utility easement. You would not do a straight line because the city doesn't have the right to dig through somebody's private property unless there's a utility easement.
And that's exactly, that's kind of what we're thinking. You know, the challenge is the policy is really vague on all that. That's all we're just saying is, you know, there's a lot of ambiguity into that policy. What the state told me when I talked to them today or yesterday, whenever I talked to them, was the idea is because everything's in a grid and block situation, you're not going to run into that private property issue because you're already going to be, the blocks are already 300 feet wide, so you'll always be over that 300-foot limit. It didn't talk about what you described or anything like that. It didn't cover that. So anyway, it was just a discussion that, you know, there's.
So let me see if I understand the action item. The action item would be probably the planning commission to take into account these additional use cases, even yours, and craft the ordinance in such a way that it clearly gives guidance on what we mean, not just at 300 feet.
Well,
Because I always assumed that 300 feet was straight.
I mean, if you throw wording in there that includes frontage, then that eliminates the side and rear, right? So the people on the downhill side of Spring, their frontage isn't going to be within 300 feet of Highline, right? And so if you include frontage in your wording or your requirement, then that might help eliminate some of that stuff.
Well, I think in that regard, though, like back to my house, if the pipe, for instance, was on this side of Highline, so I'd have to go under Highline, for instance, to tap into it. My house would be required at 300 feet. Matt George would not, because of how deep in his lot he is.
No, but it's the frontage.
Well,
It's
line.
not
That's-
the location of the structure on the property.
So if it's just the frontage, then if the pipe's in the front of your house, you're connecting to it.
Yes.
If it's
That's what
within,
we're talking about.
if it's within 350 feet of your front property line, right? Isn't that the way the ordinance
Because I
is?
believe what we've always said in some regards is you have to bring the sewer line to your house.
And to the furthest extent of your I mean, I think that's the way
Right.
Mason's reads, is that if your frontage is within 350 feet, you have to go get it and take it to the furthest extent of your frontage.
So both David and I's combined is really what we're talking about to a degree.
It's whatever you guys want it to be. You guys are the ones that we'll
I
approve
think
it.
David and I both don't want it to be anything, but it's a problem we have to solve.
Well,
You're forced along in city rights of way, for one thing, because you can't cross private property unless there's an easement. And our easements are
all over the
all
map.
over the place. So you're talking about the front of your property, where on that street, that frontage, within 300 feet of that. So,
Ted and I are on flag lots, so honestly, we have no idea what frontage means. But, I mean, I think we can define it in such a way. We're just saying there's an issue here. And I think make the planning commission aware of the issue, let them take a stab at fixing it, that maybe they can present it back to us, what they come up with.
And I think that was kind of the discussion that Wayne and I had last week over that is, you know, how, you know, we just make sure that it's, there's some clarification. I think the intent was, you know, if it's practical to hook up to a sewer, we want people to hook up to a sewer. And then just make it a blanket rule of 300 feet, isn't always practical, but if that's what we're saying to do, it's kind of like the lot line district. You know, we don't want a bunch of rules for the sake of having rules that we can't really abide by because of, you know, conditions. So.
we'll pursue it further.
So anyway, I'm just gonna wait to
Thank
hear
you.
back from Jen for this.
Okay.
State,
Well, let me know.
and I'll touch base with you on what she says on that, or maybe you and I can call her together next week, or something, we can go over that. And so that's all, we just want to make sure that we don't set ourselves up with a policy that's difficult to enforce. And also, David, what you said is probably very true too, there's the risk of that happening is very, very small to begin with anyway. There might be one or two situations, if that, it would be a problem.
I'll tell you, the bigger problem to me is the fact that you've got some houses high, some houses low.
You connecting would cost a truckload if you go to your
Some may
street.
need to pump up.
Well,
Right.
what you'd have to do if your property is below, is you would just have to put a grinder pump and a pressurized line pump into the system.
I hear you, I'm
But
just
still
saying,
not cheap, I
that
understand.
is super expensive.
Yeah, it's still not cheap.
It's
That
not
would
that
be the
bad.
technical solution.
I mean, all these houses down on,
$10.
Yes,
Well, I
yes,
mean-
it is.
all these houses down on Northview Circle, there's only maybe 3 or 4 of them that gravity. The rest of them are pumped.
Okay. Regardless, to me, I mean, again, I'm all about trying to solve the low hanging fruit. So not that we shouldn't take all of the use cases into account, but let's not get hung up on the more esoteric ones and instead focus
Well,
on the more common.
I think a
ones.
good approach would be get a map of the city with current sewer lines and see who's this impacting.
I'm
and start there.
I'm betting we're talking maybe 2-3
Yeah.
houses.
Probably right, just the idea is to, you know.
Oh, no,
let's
you
bring
got-
I
this
bet
to-
you were talking 40, 50.
You got 40 or 50 that are gonna be impacted
I'm
by.
talking that would have to dig under the road to get to it using your scenario. I don't think
Oh.
there's very many with yours.
I hope not, because that's a sucky scenario.
It is.
I mean, the goal is to try to, let's, you know, bring these concerns, issues, whatever we want to call them, challenges, back to the planning commission so that they're aware, hey, you know what, we may not have looked at this as closely as we should have.
Agreed.
That's all we were trying to do. Okay.
Yep, I think
Yep.
that's a good idea. Anyway, I gotta go.
Take care, have a good trip
Hey.
tomorrow.
Yeah,
Good luck.
thanks.
I looked for your bicycle out there, Dave, and I couldn't see it tonight.
It was raining. Well, it's right, it rained.
Well, it's done anyway. Okay, and that being said, other items, I was going to discuss what, you know, the rock line ditch that Dave brought up to us. So that was one of the things I was going to cover under other items. I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants to bring up under other items? Paul, you still with us?
I have a question.
Sure thing.
Where did, it's me talking.
Oh, I thought it was Paul. I said Paul.
Does Paul got,
Paul's muted.
he's muted there.
Okay.
Where do we stand with these reports that we got on these capstone projects? What's the next step with those?
Good point. So with Utah State University, and Mylan's not been to the last couple of meetings, I kind of covered the last one. They did a study, and they completed it, and they did the report. Now, let me back up a little bit. When we met with them, I can't remember if you were part of that first original, we explained to them that we're looking for low-cost, simple solutions to the upper areas, you know, the rock line, the exact same thing we've been discussing over here in the last few minutes. What solutions can you guys come up with? We don't need the same bullet point solutions, the same, boilerplate stuff. We need something different. What can you do for us that might be not been thought of, that won't cost the city a ton of money? We expressed that to them, and okay, we do it. They got their professor involved in it, and he had a bunch of questions, and anyway, they sent the report in. I think Corbett got a copy of it. I have a copy of it I can go find, and I know that Ted has a copy of it. And they come back in with the $3 million solution that we've already had 15. So that's where the Utah State capstone project went. The way I looked at it, quite honestly, when we talked about doing it, it was probably something that was a little over the top for us anyway. But they got a project, they got a grade.
Yeah.
We're not forced to act on it, but we can look at that. And I know Ted, they end up working with Ted, so I know Ted's got a copy of it. Maybe we check with Ted on what they come up with. But what I read was pretty, not feasible. It's kind of back to the same discussion we had. So that was the last I seen. It's pretty much exactly what, I won't say exactly, but it's right on par with the same level of work that the BYU capstone project of 3 or 4 years ago presented. A lot of money and a lot of time to solve the problems that we simply have been dealing with and haven't had the funds to complete any.
Okay, and how about the BYU capstone?
The BYU, they did a report to the council, 3 or 4 years ago?
No, they did another now, we had 2 capstone projects going.
That's a different one. Okay, I'm talking about the one that was 3 or 4 years ago.
No, the current one that they did.
I don't know, I have no idea where we're at on that. That I know nothing about. That's been all in the engineering works, that was to do with this line down here. I have zero idea where that's at.
Okay. I just wondered if they needed more review from us or comments
Direction.
or what, I don't know.
So Ted might be the guy to ask on that.
Okay. That's the only things I had.
Paul, you have anything? He's muted.
Here I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay. Perfect. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, we're talking with the developer again of the Davis property about moving the salt shed. And I don't know how we make it work, but we're talking about bringing the salt shed up here to the city center. It's just talk right now, but he wants to demo the building or possibly repurpose that building into his development.
Okay.
And I don't know how we're gonna get the salt in the building if we do it up here.
I don't think it's practical, is it? Personally, I mean, I haven't given it
Do we have that real estate?
Well, we do if we took up the grassy area on the east end of the building,
What's the footprint of that compared to the current salt shed, though?
it's gonna be pretty close. I mean,
Is it?
yeah,
Feels
because
to me like
the building's 80 feet deep, give or take.
Okay. And the salt shed is you don't
40
know,
by 80.
40 by 80.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The issue, the thing I can't figure out is how to get the salt into it if we do it up here.
Well, we just piss off the neighbors every single time that huge freaking truck backs in and blocks Woodland Hills Drive.
Well, if we dumped it in from the upper parking lot, that wouldn't do that.
Can there be a hatch put on top of the building? So you run a conveyor to that hatch and it falling off into that hatch, into the storage building?
I don't know. What do you do with it once you get it in? Because if you drop it in from the same spot, I mean,
I'm just gonna build something like this.
Could we do a silo?
Well,
Let me ask-
Silo?
Let me ask this question as a citizen,
Yeah.
one, and maybe if I won't be, not gonna be, I'm not, just to make that clear, but from a council member's perspective, why would I want to abandon a perfectly good location, put it up here and make it almost an industrial facility right next to all my residential facilities, city hall and the community that's trying to keep it quiet residential, so that a developer can put high-density housing where
Well,
nobody's wanted it past anymore.
He's dropped it from 1,300 units to 700 units or 600 and something, 675.
And it's a trade-off.
But he's
There's other
also,
things that are considered possibilities for us that would benefit the city if,
That's the question.
So
he's throwing a carrot out.
I know, I'm aware of that, that's why I said, yeah.
I'm looking at it from a twofold approach, right? As a plow driver, having salt right here sounds like joy and happiness. That would be great for me to be able to just have my truck right underneath us and having that right there. That sounds fabulous, as long as we don't get bogged down on top of each other. Because that's another nice thing down there. The carrot he would have to throw us would have to be larger than what he's getting, in my opinion.
What he's offering.
Correct. Oh, no, what he's getting, right? He needs to be offering more than what he's getting, right? So I would say that what Mark is bringing up is a very huge thing. Putting the salt shed right there on the city building would create somewhat of an eyesore in comparison to what's there now. As a resident that's across the street, that also would not be my first choice. But if it makes the biggest sense, if it makes a good sense for the city, then that's a different potential argument to look at. Because I try and usually table my feelings to what's best for the city. But it sounds like the hypotheticals need to be flushed out a little bit more. Paul?
So I have a thought. So, I mean, this is their ask, right? Could we not go to them and say, look, here are the parameters, here are the issues. You guys need to be creative, spend the money on an engineer, whatever you need to do, come back with some plans that we can look at and either approve or adjust or whatever. But maybe we make it their issue because it's their ask or their request. So my guess is maybe with some creativity, they can come up with something that we haven't thought about, some new technology or something, but that should be their problem.
Now they'll say, hey, we understand what you want to do here. We need a solution to help that works for us as well.
I think too, if there is a recognized benefit to the city some way or another, then we need to work with them on it. We just don't tell them, you come back to us.
Well, we
Because
have to be.
we have an interest in it.
The concern it creates is that, I mean, what happens if it's more than what they want to deal with? They just de-annex and go safe.
Well, that's a
we
risk
lose the
we-
opportunity for any commercial.
Well, I think we've already been down that road, right? That's why we don't have the Davis Ranch in Woodland Hills anymore. Is they went that route. So I think this has to be, politics at its best to negotiate potentially what this partnership can look like. And it needs to be that. We can't just say, hey, we don't have time for you. Make us an offer we can't refuse and we'll maybe look at it. Right? We need to sit there and look at it, but also, is there any reason we have to abandon that location? Who owns the land that's sitting on?
It's city.
So-
It's in city
So as the owners of that land, can we petition to have that annexed into Woodland Hills? I think that is actually, so that may make sense anyway. If we own the land.
I don't see Salem being heavy-handed enforcing Woodland Hills because it's not zoned yet.
Well,
How do
it would
they
be
change the
silly.
zoning? How do they change the zoning on you to make you non-compliant?
Well, they can't, right? We have to petition to have a zone change.
Salt shed, you're saying salt shed is in the city limits right now, is that what I just heard?
But it's owned by
It's owned by
Woodland Hills,
It's probably owned, but it's within the boundaries of Salem City.
Salem City.
The south well is in Woodland Hills' boundary, but the salt shed and the north well are in Salem.
So I think that's an element that we need to look at, is potentially what does that annexation process
Okay, so
might look
that's-
like?
That's gonna be part of figuring all of this.
One question, just a thought here, and I realize again, we're being recorded. What is to prevent the city of Salem from condemning the property? That's a question. I don't either. I'm not saying they can't do it or should do it or will do it. I'm just saying, can they do it? I'm asking.
I doubt they would do it with being city property. Now, if it was somebody's private property there, with reason, they may pursue that. But us being a sister city, so to speak, I don't think there's much risk of that. Say again?
Well, that's what I meant by
Yeah,
condemning.
and that,
Salem, eminent domain.
I don't see Salem doing that to another city.
Well, they'd have to, per our conversations around eminent domain, they have to have a good reason, right? It can't just be our developer wants it, eminent domain, you know?
What it has to be is it has to be the beneficial good of their community, not necessarily ours.
Yeah, I think that's a hard argument, but
You know, I mean, again, I'm not the roads guy guru or anything like that, but it seems to me that that's the most practical place for the salt shed, especially with loading it. You're already at the bottom of the hill, so you can start working your way up. I'm not the driver, I'm not the one that's keep driving
Well,
down there.
there's another variable though too, right? Is I would much rather keep that salt truck loaded down to the bottom of Woodland Hills. I don't want a huge heavy salt truck driving up and down Woodland, well, just up Woodland Hills to drop it off, right? We don't need more impacts on the roundabout. One's enough. But
That's not
I think-
ours.
what's that? That's not ours here. The county needs to fix that, right? But I do think that's what we need to look at. I think a negotiation and conversation needs to happen. You know, again, we're recorded and I don't know how much public is out there. I think there's some opportunities. Okay, then I don't know if it's off the table that we might be able to get the top half re-annexed back into Woodland Hills. Okay, if that's not on the table anymore. So that means they've got sewer they've got to deal with, they've got water they've got to deal with, that we potentially could solve those problems for them, right? Well, sewer's right there at the church.
But the Maple Canyon well is, I mean, their development borders the Maple Canyon well.
But we hold 40% of that, right? Great. We'll say them. But I think there might be some avenues here to negotiate. It all depends on how much he wants the property.
Maybe you two, or you three, or any combination thereof, meet with Salem City and the developer and say, hey, okay, this is the challenges we're looking at, this is our challenge, this is what you got, you know, maybe everybody together can come up with a solution. And the nice thing about that is everybody's in the room, so everybody knows what was said, there's none of that, he said, she said stuff. So you all have the same.
Yeah. I think some conversations would be.
I'm just trying to figure out how to get it into the building, how to get enough salt in the building if it ends up coming up here. I I hate to see us have any kind of talk about bringing it up here, if it's not gonna work in the long run. I mean, you can take and do a trap door and dump it in, you can auger it across the top of the building, but if we're limited to 50, I mean, if we're limited to a 15-foot height,
we're pushing capacity on that. For us,
we're beyond what we can get.
well,
This past winter, we went through about 1,400 tons this past winter.
so without the
Started
racking,
with 9.
without the racking, and you pushing the wall all the way up to the door, right? Giving access for the truck to drive in and dump salt and the skid steer. And that's it, basically. How much can you load in there of that 15?
If we can get it in from the top, we can get 1,200 tons.
Okay.
If we have
So
to stack
still
it,
not enough for the last winter. So for me, it makes sense for us to negotiate and consider options if there's an improvement on our current situation. Because right now, no matter what we do, there is an expense to the city that we have to be mindful and cognizant of in relocating that. Predominantly your time, which is expensive time for us as a city. And so we'll just have to look at that and say, hey, they've got to make it worth our while without us just telling them to take a
Does
hike.
this development group own any other property in the area? Or might they be willing to swap for it?
you guys want to drive someplace else, get your salt? How far do you want to go?
As short as possible. Because when that storm is flying and snow is sticking, the salt shed already is too far away. So I would love for the salt shed to be just right there as you peel off the street. It's right there. But I don't want it there because I don't want people seeing it. I want it back there. So it's an eyesore. It's a needed eyesore that I don't want on the frontage of Woodland Hills. Frankly, I think its current location is ideal for the variables that we can control.
And a lot of other communities, it's also a lot further away from the roads than ours.
Oh, big time.
Corbett, what about a nicer looking shed on the road, setting back, the road that goes to the salt shed, setting back a ways? That's all ours, right? That road going back?
The road is, but not the property on both sides.
Right. How wide is the road? How wide is that easement?
It's not wide enough for the building.
I think your best case scenario is we get some of the property on that hillside and build a massive structure in the mountainside and then bury it. Then it disappears. There's an entry door and a peak and a whatever. We go in, it's huge, it's what we need, we can get out.
Well, what I'm thinking is you've got that property that would be to the south of that road. That is owned, which was in the city limits. You know, up on Woodland Hills. You know, is it possible that that person might be willing to negotiate a sale of that land that the developer could purchase?
You talked to Danielle yet?
I haven't seen them.
You know what I'm talking about? And then use that block of land that could be acquired as part of the development. The developer would buy that land and then do a land swap, which could include buildings and do something like that. I mean, there's, like you said, there are solutions if we want to look at it.
Oh, can we let him put a building next to it and charge him lease? Now it's a revenue stream. Because he wants the land for something. If it's just a structure to service in a similar manner, is Salem requiring him to have some municipal structure there for them?
No, I was talking about what I was, you mean.
Yeah, mine's in it.
He could demolish that if he needed to.
Well, I'm saying if he's just wanting to put something there, let him put something there and charge him a footprint fee yearly.
I don't know that we're ever going to get, I don't know that we're going to get anywhere until we have more information from the developer, my concern is, we talked about putting the salt shed up here on this end of the building. How are we gonna get the salt in?
Well, right now, you've got a, what, 200-foot runway to help him back into that thing to dump?
And you don't have that.
We don't have that up here. Or we have him come with a single, doesn't he bring a double?
40-foot live well for a 53-foot live well.
Yeah, I think that's your biggest constraint, right? Because we can keep stacking salt if we have to, but that's,
Yeah, but you don't have the room up here. You're only at 15-foot ceiling height. How are you gonna leave 7 feet on the top of the pile for skid steer? If you take an auger into it, how are you gonna get salt, 60 feet wide and 80 feet deep? And do it within a 15-foot ceiling? Because sure, you can put augers in it all, till the cows come home. And you can put an auger every 5 feet across the ceiling, so that it drops it in and fills it up right to the bottom of the auger. But by the time you take the auger, by the time what does that look like?
oh, we're in $1 million on mechanical.
That's the.
And then who fixes the broken augers? Yeah, no, they last forever.
No, they don't last forever.
It's a joke.
I don't know. I hate to see us start talking about putting a salt shed up here and then end up, putting a salt shed up here that we want to get 500 tons. And we're still delivering it all winter long.
From what I'm hearing, there's nothing that's really benefiting the city in this negotiation at this point.
I think that needs to be studied with the salt on this end, the pluses and minuses. And,
I can't figure out how to get the salt into it. And
okay, well,
we've talked about, what's it gonna look like up here? Is it gonna be more salt on the ground? Less salt? Is it gonna be any different than it is right now? And I think as long as we're loading it and we're being careful when we load it, okay, this past winter, there were maybe 2 or 3 times where we ended up with a pile of salt on the ground underneath the truck. Not an issue that can't be addressed and addressed easily.
but I think if those are critical components,
Turn off the auger.
then say that we can't store it here. And what other alternatives do we have then?
Well, it sounds to me like we can't get an equivalent building here.
I don't know how to.
Well, not without making it a freaking silo. We need to make this thing look like a barn and make it a huge grain silo that.
So here's Woodland Hills Drive. This is the access road, and this is the area, and that's the salt shed. I know it's not quite right. This is actually in Salem City right now, is what you're saying. I don't know how much of that is.
All of it.
Okay, so the whole road and everything?
No.
I'm just, okay. So you have the homeowner here, and then you have an open area here, right? That's what I'm wondering is, what would it take, and it would have to be put on the onus of the developer that wants to do this, to say, you know what? If the only thing that works for us is to move the salt shed in this area here somewhere. Okay? The challenge with moving it here is the property owner here. If you can work something out with them where we can acquire this, and then you can acquire this and then trade us, we can get a new building here, we can get, maybe something more practical, and it's even closer to the highway, still in the bottom, and maybe something like that solves the problem, but what it will require is us acquiring this land to do it, and that might be something that the developer's willing to work with. Land swaps happen all the time. That's what just jumps out as I'm thinking about.
Yeah, no, I think that's a viable option.
Well, I think so, especially if they'll give us the credit for the current building. So that we can build an equivalence, and then we can even dump a little bit more in to get a public works section on it or something.
It would almost require the developer to put something in there.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be pretty much, we've got a system that works for us. We can't afford a lot more money, so if you can make us whole without costing us an arm and a leg or whatever it's going to cost us to do that, I think that's really the only if we're looking at even thinking about doing this, to me, that's the first thing that jumps out as making any sense. And it may or may not be doable because, you know, I'm kind of with, you know, and I'm not having studied it, but setting a shed here is going to have a lot of challenges that we probably not even aware of, let alone the ones we are aware of.
It's a messy business that I think we don't want in the city center.
And that's what developers do. They do that. Every community does that with developers. Is, you know, what's the next plan, what's current?
Yeah, I think that's a great avenue.
I don't know when we'll meet with them again, but
And, you know, with the market the way it is right now, how serious are they moving forward? You know, are they,
Sounds like they're more serious than I thought they even
Oh,
would
they're
be.
serious. They presented their plan to
Salem
city,
and-
to Salem.
And
It's
it was
accepted.
approved unanimously.
again, I think maybe the place to start is with Salem City and the developer, saying, you guys, you know, this is what do you want from us? You start with that. What can, you know, what is it you need from us to make this work?
Yeah.
And we say, okay, that's fine, but this is what we need in return, or something, a solution. Or maybe they're willing to offer up more than we even expect from ourselves. Let them make the offer first.
Oh, they typically got a little more cash to roll around in than we do.
I'm sure they
That's
do.
not hard though.
They buy the city.
I don't know about that.
Okay, that, any other items or other business? In that case, I would go ahead and, excuse me, next meeting date. At this point, you know, we're at the end of,
July, first
well,
of
first
August.
of August. You know, do we want to try to have another meeting for the end of the year? And to be quite, we're at the point right now, my term is up at the end of this year. You know, where do we go from here?
That's what Wayne thought too.
And Wayne's term's up at the end of this year. Well, I think he's.
They,
ad hoc.
somebody actually told you that your term would expire?
he's getting nervous.
Let me rephrase this. I committed 4 years. You know, I don't mind hanging on, but I just, you know, I want to make sure that we bring value here. If we're not bringing value, and over last year, I thought we brought a little value, but there was a couple of years there where we were bringing no value. If we're going to continue to bring value, I can, you know, consider hanging on. But if we're not going to have any value, you know, I need a compelling reason to stay.
Personally, I feel that there is a lot of value if we can start capitalizing on creating priorities with dollar amounts and getting that to flow up also into the city budget, right? I think that is where we can get the biggest bang for our buck, is presenting dollar items to the city budget to allocate the pot of money to, instead of, dare I say, our current policy or our current procedure in allocating budget funds. So I would hope that this continues for the sake of being able to better help us as a council articulate what those priorities are, and it helps us align ourselves. And we need more voices, more words, more insight, more opinions to be able to do that successfully, while other cities have staff and things to help. We just don't. And that's kind of where this committee falls. Now, whether we listen or not is on our heads, but I hope we're listening.
If you're not listening,
Then it has no purpose, right? But I agree. I feel it has added to our conversations on the council, and we hopefully have listened to the best of our financial ability. So thank you.
that being said, next meeting date. Do we just hold off, and if we got something, bring it up, or do we actually want to schedule a date between now and the end of the year?
Well, we've got some deliverables that we may need to follow up on, right? So we've got a rock line ditch project that we need to probably coordinate and get out there. If we're looking for people on this committee to potentially help create that prioritization. Maybe it's back to the other items. We had a demonstration or a presentation in our last council meeting per road maintenance.
Which I listened to, I didn't comment on.
It was, yeah. I think that I personally would love to see, as a member of the council, what that maintenance looks like, because that will then also help us inform what does the road budget need to look like, or at least what potentially it needs to look like to meet our needs for maintenance. And what does it look like to maintain the best and go backwards?
I'm gonna propose, I'm not sure what my October schedule's like.
Okay.
First part, we're looking at trying to take a trip up the Oregon coast. I haven't quite nailed that down yet, so I don't want to commit to the first Tuesday in October. But I can look at the 7th of November, which is the first Tuesday. If that doesn't, I don't know, but looks like 14th is the scheduled council meeting, again, the second.
Mm-hmm.
Propose the second, the 7th of November for last meeting of the year. Nothing else, just a review of what we've done. Does that work?
Yeah, I think that works.
So let's call
Does that
it.
work for you?
The rock line ditch stuff has got to be done before.
I think that's an urgency thing we'll just need to
And it's
get
something
done.
We've already talked about here. We know what we need to do, and if we can take action on it.
I think we'll
we
just
can
need to,
get some follow-up on it by then too.
if we'll talk to David and get Jody's chicken scratch, or you mean shorthand, right? One of the two, we can then start moving on that. So you can ping me on that, on how you need me to,
Are you going to take
Consist-
care of that?
per your direction.
So you're gonna get the data?
I can get the data, yes.
I think he's saying, are you gonna talk to Dave?
Are you gonna
I will talk to
David?
David.
You're gonna get the data, you're gonna,
Yep, I'll block out an hour for me to chat with David.
And I'm available if you need anything. A lot of the time, I'll be back. I'm gone. I'll be back. I'm actually supposed to land on the 22nd of August. I'm coming back. So I should be here hopefully on the night of the 22nd for the council meeting for the pump stuff. And then I'm probably good. September, I'm probably going to go down to Colorado Springs for a little bit, and then the October cruise up Oregon, and then these are all working for me.
Good for you.
And then when I get back from that, I'm pretty much done until.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping we get this information within like a week and a half too. We need,
I'll be leaving the 17th. I'll be gone that Thursday, the 16th or 17th, whatever that August is, and I'll be back on the 22nd.
Okay.
So I can't, so for that week in August, I'm out of commission, but I'm more than willing to help.
you're good.
If you need grunt work or something like that. And of course, with Corbett, I've been helping him whenever he needs help. We may be pouring concrete tomorrow, I'm not sure.
That sounds like a party. Corbett, when does our normal or first snow fly? I never can remember that.
mid-October.
Mid-October, okay. Starts to
I go
stick
off of-
around.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, asphalt plants, the only thing I'm referring to is the asphalt plants typically shut down October 15th. I think that's the average shutdown date for asphalt plants.
Okay.
Because it's too cold and it's started to storm.
Yeah, it makes
Now,
sense.
that time of
Yeah.
year, I don't think the storms are sticking.
But
because
still, it'll start throwing and we'll have struggles getting
But
those ditches
if it's-
done.
If it's snowing, we're plowing and salting.
Well, I know that I'm usually hanging Christmas lights in my t-shirt and shorts in November, Thanksgiving time. Not this year, but last year, but like every other year since I've been here. And then I never get them down till April, so I.
Okay, perfect.
So,
Then I'll talk to David. If you haven't heard from me, Corbett, within, a few days and you think about it, ping me on it. Harassment goes a long ways these days with me.
There's a little teeter-totter up at the playground that's still looking for bolts in it.
Yeah, you I need help here, guys. Good to know. Okay, teeter totter.
Said you wanted to be motivated.
Hey, right now, if I don't get something done that I said I would do, it's because it's not in my head anymore, and I need to be reminded of it.
So before we go down another rabbit hole, I'm gonna make a motion for adjournment.
I second that.
Sounds good.
That's a first, and Wayne gave us a second.
Yep.
Paul, thank you.